Silakan Bapak Ibu absen dulu, ini linknya. bit.ly absen ILO TVET. TVET. Baik, Bapak Ibu, saya juga hendak memberikan sedikit tata laksana dalam pelaksanaan webinar ini. Sambil saya sharing, tadi saya sudah berikan link absennya, silakan buat Bapak Ibu yang baru bergabung, bisa absen dulu. Kemudian sebagai informasi, ILO akan mematikan semua mikrofon dari semua peserta. Nanti kalau misalnya memang ada peserta yang menurut kami perlu bicara, maka kami akan membukanya, kami akan meng-unmute, misalnya saya gitu, nanti saya akan di-unmute, tapi setelah di-unmute oleh ILO, mohon Bapak atau Ibu yang sudah di-unmute juga harus tetap mengklik unmute-nya. Kemudian saya sarankan Bapak Ibu untuk mematikan fungsi kamera. Ini tidak harus, ya fungsi videonya, tapi kami sarankan karena biasanya kalau videonya dimatikan, internetnya menjadi lebih lancar, kita bisa lebih enak mendengarnya. Kemudian kami juga akan melihat isi dari chat, mohon tidak menyebarkan isu hoaks atau menyesatkan maupun sara. Kemudian nanti kita akan mendengarkan paparan dari pembicara yang berasal dari Australia. Kalau ada pertanyaan selama paparan, silakan pertanyaan tersebut bisa diketikkan di chat. Jadi saya beserta rekan-rekan dari ILO akan memantau ruang chat terus-menerus. Dan nanti saya akan mencoba mengumpulkan atau merangkum pertanyaan-pertanyaannya. Setelah itu setelah sesi paparan selesai, saya akan melemparkan pertanyaan itu ke pembicara. Selamat pagi, selamat pagi lagi Bapak Ibu yang baru bergabung. Selamat bergabung di webinar mengenai pendidikan dan pelatihan vokasi yang hari ini akan membahas perbedaan antara pendidikan vokasi yang tradisional atau tatap muka dibandingkan dengan pendidikan vokasi yang dilakukan secara daring atau online. Selamat bergabung, terima kasih atas ketertarikannya. Silakan absen dulu ke dalam tautan yang ada di layar. Selamat pagi lagi Bapak Ibu yang baru bergabung. Silakan absen dulu. Silakan matikan mikrofon Anda. Kemudian kami juga menyarankan supaya koneksi internetnya lebih enak, kameranya atau videonya bisa dimatikan. Kemudian saya hendak menjelaskan bahwa di sini ada terjemahan langsung karena nanti paparannya dalam bahasa Inggris. Silakan Bapak Ibu lihat ke bagian bawah dari kotak Zoom Bapak Ibu. Kemudian ada interpretation. Silakan Bapak dan Ibu pilih bahasa Jepang. Itu bahasa Jepang, nanti keluarnya bahasa Indonesia bukan Jepang. Mohon maaf kenapa pakai itu, karena kebetulan di Zoom tidak ada logo bahasa Indonesia. Tapi kalau Bapak Ibu lebih mau mendengarkan langsung yang bahasa Inggris, bisa pilih bahasa Inggris. Jadi diklik di bagian interpretation, kemudian pilih bahasa yang Bapak Ibu mau dengarkan. Mohon menunggu sebentar ya Bapak Ibu, mohon maaf ini sudah jam 10:02. Mohon maaf, ini tadi pembicara yang dari Australia sudah masuk, tapi kemudian keluar lagi. Kita coba sebentar ya. Kita tunggu sebentar. Baik Bapak Ibu, sambil menunggu, mohon yang baru masuk bisa absen dulu, kemudian bisa men-setting penerjemahnya, klik tombol interpretation, pilih bahasa yang Bapak Ibu mau dengarkan. Baik, Bapak Ibu, saya jelaskan dulu pembicaranya siapa. Pembicara pada hari ini berasal dari TVET Queensland. TVET itu adalah Technical Education and Further Education Australia, atau pendidikan vokasi dan pendidikan lanjutan dari pemerintah Australia. Ibu Juli ini adalah Direktur Eksekutif dari Pendidikan Vokasi, jadi memang pas sekali beliau akan menjelaskan apa nih plus minus dari pendidikan daring maupun dari pendidikan tatap muka. Kemudian pembicara yang kedua adalah Sandy McCoy. Beliau adalah Product Lead Educator Support Services juga dari TVET Queensland. Jadi beliau satu tim dengan Ibu Juli. Kami sudah melihat Ibu Sandy di sini. Ibu Sandy, mungkin silahkan memperkenalkan diri sambil menunggu Ibu Juli. Halo?
Hi, Sandy McCoy here.
Oh, hi, Sandy. Hi, that's great. So while we are waiting for Julie, can you introduce yourself to the participants? We have around 200 participants already here in the room.
Excellent. My name's Sandy McCoy, as you can see my picture on the screen there. I'm the product lead for the business and finance portfolios, and I work in the Educator Support Services field in TAFE, Queensland. And I'll hand over to Julie, who is here with us as well today.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Nice to having you here. Now I see Julie. Hi, Julie. You are still mute. You need to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Aha.
That's great.
Yes. You had muted me.
Yes.
I couldn't.
Hi. Good morning, Julie. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you very much for being the speaker of this very exciting webinar series with Sandy.
My pleasure. Hello,
Yes.
everybody. Wave, wave, wave.
So we now have 241 participants in the webinar, and I think more people will be coming in. But now it's already 10, more than 10 a.m. So I think we better start. So yes. So just to give you a little bit of a short brief. So we have explained the participants that an interpretation service is provided. So we will be having a simultaneously interpretation. So you can just go on with your presentation, no worries. And at the same time, there will be interpretation to Indonesian language, and the participant will be able to listen in Indonesian language. And I understand that you will be working from your screen on the presentation. So I will leave it to you on that. And I have also explained to the participants that they can ask question anytime and put it in the chat room. And I, as the moderator, along with my colleagues from ILO Jakarta, we will be managing and compiling the questions. And then we will ask you the important questions at the end of your presentation. Will that be okay? Yes,
that's fine. Yes, I've allowed time at the end for questions, but yes.
Okay, so I think we just start. Bapak Ibu, ini adalah Ibu Julie dan Ibu Sandy sudah siap. Mari kita dengarkan webinarnya. Jangan lupa di setting bahasanya. Silakan pilih Bapak Ibu mau dengar bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris.
All right, you'll have to give me share screen rights. At the moment, it's disabled.
Yes, now I open it. Can you already?
Thank you.
Yes.
So if you can just let me know that you can see my screen then when it
comes up.
Clearly. Thank you. Perfect. Yes. Excellent. So thank you everybody for having me and Sandy. I'll be starting the presentation and then I will hand over to Sandy at halfway through. So just to give you an overview, sorry, I just moved that on, of what we will cover today. So as you saw from the previous slide there, my topic is around the introduction to online TVET. And in particular, moving from a traditional TVET model of learning to a digital learning model. In terms of what we will cover today, we will start with just the basics around what is online learning, the characteristics of online learning, the different terminology that is often used, and also then the benefits of online learning. What we're wanting to do today is really share with you and take you through an experience of what we've been through as a TAFE organisation, because we have transitioned to a more flexible or online approach. So by sharing our experiences and providing a few case examples for you, we hopefully can give you some tips about how to design a strategy, as well as then the lessons we've learned from doing it from our experience. So as I've got on the screen there, we'll look at the drivers of an online TVET strategy, the enablers of success. We'll work through a number of case studies, and that's at that point I will hand over to Sandy to take you through those. We'll then close out by sharing with you some of the lessons we learned and any tips we have for future. And then at the end, as it says, I will allow some question time. So, you know, as TAFE Queensland, we're a very, very large organisation, and in 2000 or prior to 2017, we were 6 separate training organisations, and in July in 2007, we merged into a single training organisation. We're spread across the whole of Queensland. So there's over 50 campuses across Queensland. So, you know, that is a challenge for us. We have some in very rural, remote areas, and then some in our major cities. We have a very large range of qualifications that we deliver. So we have over 500 different qualifications that we are registered to provide training and assessment. In saying so, it's obviously a lot of different industry areas, and in all of those different geographical locations. We have over 100,000 students, so we're a very large organisation, and you know, but we have gone through some challenges, and recently that transition from what we would call a traditional training and vocational education training approach to a more online, and if I can say more online, because we'll define that in a moment. For TAFE Queensland, in moving and transitioning away from our traditional to this more flexible online delivery model, there are a couple of key drivers for us. So firstly, it's within our strategic plan that our goal is to build up our reputation as a provider of innovative and technology enhanced training solutions. In doing that, obviously our key focus is to transition the training to incorporate more technology. And there's different ways that you can incorporate that technology, and we will unpack that as we go through this afternoon. We also undertook what was called a master product strategy. What that was all about was that we were implementing a new learning management system and a new video conference platform. And our goal then was to provide or ensure that all of our qualifications had an online presence, that there was some learning content and some delivery that was happening from those learning platforms. To enable us to do that, we had to have then learning content that was built within those structures. So the master product strategy was a very directed strategy where we developed the learning content and assessment for a large number of our qualifications. It was a very large investment in terms of budget that was linked to both the development of the content, but also then obviously the implementation of a new learning management system at the same time. So that was in 2015 in alignment with the transition to a single training organisation. We implemented the learning management system, a video conference system. We developed a large amount of training and assessment product. And then, of course, we can't forget lastly that the drive in terms of the digital era. So, you know, digitization, globalization, the requirement or the desire for industry for workers to have digital skills, to have those higher level skills like critical thinking, innovation and entrepreneurship. They were all part of what is driving our change, I suppose, to a provider of more innovative and technology enhanced training solutions. It's all about preparing those students to be able to operate in that new workforce. If we start with the terms, so there's a plethora of different terms that are out there that are used to describe, you know, learning using technology. To name a few, you've got online learning, there's e-learning, there's blended learning, flipped learning, technology enhanced learning, connected learning, distance learning, and that's just to name a few. So it becomes very confusing, and often those terms are used interchangeably. So I thought it was important that we start with getting a common ground. So as I move through the presentation this afternoon, you understand which particular modes we're talking about. If we try to sort of define or interpret the differences between, and let's just take those three common ones on screen there. What's the difference between online learning versus that, what we're, TAFE Queensland, we call mixed mode learning, but probably more commonly called blended learning or technology enhanced learning. And then that last term of distance learning, which is also commonly called flexible learning. So in trying to differentiate between these different terms, the key differences do relate to location. So the use of a classroom, whether it's on campus or whether there is a utilisation of more of those virtual classrooms that we can gain through the video conferencing platforms such as Zoom. Another characteristic is there around the direction or the instruction provided. So whether it's directed by the teacher, and in doing that direction, is it direct in terms of a face-to-face, or is the direction through an instruction that's provided to the student in text? Or in some cases, and in particular with distance learning, it's very much a self-paced. So there is little input or direction by the teacher. The third characteristics is all around interaction. So whether the interaction is direct between teacher and student, as well as from student to student. And then associated with that is what we say synchronous or asynchronous. So synchronous means at the same time, so coming together as a student cohort with the teacher, and the instruction being very direct at the same time, as opposed to asynchronous, which means that the students are not required to attend at a certain date or time to get that instruction, that it's done through more a paper-based type of or in-system instruction. If we sort of unpack what's on screen there, so if we define the online, how we at TAFE Queensland define our online learning models or programs, is where the students are working at home and they work at a time where it suits them and they work at their own pace. So the teacher is assigned to them. They will provide direction. They will expect the student to check in both digitally and perhaps give some sort of phone support to them. But there's no in-person interaction. All the communication is done through the digital form. In the second scenario, which is our more common and what we have moved towards, is mixed mode learning. That's where the students still interact. However, they're not doing it in a face-to-face mode. They may come together in a virtual classroom, such as what we're doing today, using one of the video conferencing platforms that we have. We do it synchronously, meaning it's locked into their timetable, their schedule to attend, say on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. They come in and they will then undertake their learning or their training directly with the teacher instructing them, but using a virtual classroom as the platform. Because it's mixed mode or blended, there is some requirement for them to come onto campus and do some face-to-face, in particular to learn their practical skills. So they may be in a laboratory or a simulated environment, such as our nursing labs, where they learn the practical skills, practice those skills, and then often there's a third component where they actually may be placed in a workplace. So hence the term mixed mode. There's still the use of technology to deliver the learning and the instruction, but it is done in a variety of different ways. There's a number of different strategies. The last one then is what we call our digital, or our distance or our flexible learning. And that's really characterised by the use of paper-based resources. So, you know, some of our students are in very remote areas where they may have no access to internet, and therefore technology is not suitable. So in their case, they would need a paper-based resource that they can work with. In that instance, there's no interperson interaction, although there'll be some communication between the teacher and the student through the use of usually a phone, again, mainly restricted by internet and then access to technology. So, as I said, TAFE Queensland, we've transitioned from a more traditional face-to-face delivery. If we went back 3 years ago, majority of our programs were delivered in that format. As we've progressed over the last 2 to 3 years, we have a large number of online learning. So that first scenario where the students are doing it self-paced, they still have a teacher that they are assigned, and they have you know, opportunities to discuss their work with their teachers, but they're very much a self-paced learning mode. Majority of our transition was into that mixed mode delivery, where we have some face-to-face class, but there's also a large amount of that virtual classroom delivery. If I just move on then. Obviously, there's a number of different benefits to moving to both blended and online learning. Some of those being that it's an excellent way to increase student engagement, especially the use of blended, which gives them a variety of different options. It allows us to look after a greater range of students, those that have a desire to learn fully online, for those like apprentices who are based in the workplace, and then those that want a combination of the two, which is through the blended learning option. So we can cater for a greater percentage of learners by using the different delivery options. It provides greater flexibility for the existing workforce that may need to be retrained, upskilled. It empowers learners with autonomy over their learning. They feel they've got greater control of their learning, when they want to do it, how they want to learn. It allows for more innovative teaching and learning practices to be embedded, the utilisation of technology, the enhancement of their digital skills, so therefore again preparing them for the future workforce. It allows them to, we can provide digital learning tools to support collaboration and social learning. And again, that's all part of creating tomorrow's digitally enabled workforce. It allows us to build the capability of our educators and build their digital skills. And then it provides a repository for very, very well-designed online content that can be used and therefore used consistently between different teachers, between different regions, different locations, campuses across Queensland. I'm hoping this video works, so I just going to press play. So just let me know if you can't hear the audio here, but I just thought it would be a good way just to start the session is just showing you a quick video of what online learning means to us.
So you're thinking about upskilling, changing back into the workforce, but with so many options, where do you start? And will you actually finish with so much going on? More people complete their online courses with TAFE Queensland Online than with any other online education provider in Australia. In fact, 80% of people who start with us actually finish their course, compared to the national average of just 7%. So what's our secret? In a word, support. From the minute you enrol right through to completion, TAFE Queensland Online offers flexible, affordable, fully supported study options so you can achieve your goals. With nationally recognised qualifications, there's a career pathway to suit you. Enrol today and finish what you start. TAFE Queensland Online. Make great happen.
So hopefully you heard that. Did someone want to just give me a thumbs up to say yes, you could hear that?
Well, we can also hear Haley. Yeah,
Yes, you could.
yes. But it will be great if you can repeat the video with a higher volume. Will that be fine?
So to what the video said?
Yeah, can you like replay it with your volume up?
Okay, can do.
So you're thinking about upskilling, changing careers, or getting back into the workforce? But with so many options, where do you start? And will you actually finish with so much going on? More people complete their online courses with TAFE Queensland Online than with any other online education provider in Australia. In fact, 80% of people who start with us actually finish their course, compared to the national average of just 7%. So what's our secret? In a word, support. From the minute you enrol right through to completion, TAFE Queensland Online offers flexible, affordable, fully supported study options so you can achieve your goals. With nationally recognised qualifications, there's a career pathway to suit you. Enrol today and finish what you start. TAFE Queensland Online. Make great happen.
Was that better?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So look, presenting that, there was for several reasons. One is, if you think and just reflect back for the last 5 minutes while I've been talking, and if all you do is talk to a student, then obviously, you know, it's passive learning. So therefore, students tend to be less engaged. As soon as you get a visual on screen that talks with all that animation, movement, different colors, you can see everyone was more engaged. So I think that just shows the benefit of moving to a more online and digitally enhanced learning situation. The other reason for putting that up was just to give you some statistics there about the greater percentage of students that do actually complete their study. So as the video said, we're proud to say that 80% of our students who start the online course actually finished. And that is well above what is the national average, which is around 7%. So again, the message there is, you know, people like to study that way. They can be successful, but as the video said, a lot of that is dependent on the support that's provided. You can't expect a student to be successful by just giving them content and say, you know, go and do your study, tell us when you're finished. We need to be interacting with them frequently, and we need to ensure that we provide them the support when they need support and assistance, whether that's with their study or with their technology. Whoops, don't want to see that again. We'll just move that on. Online study doesn't suit all. So we need to acknowledge that not all students do want to study in that online or blended learning mode. TAFE Queensland did some research as to what are the characteristics of the learners who do choose to study online, and they came up with 5 different personas. We've got the social butterfly. They're obviously the people that like to have a good chat. They like to interact with each other as well as their teacher. They appreciate the collaboration and the communication, and they see that as being much more important in their study than just getting the qualification at the end. The second group, ones we call the quiet achievers, are those that just like to get the work done. They participate in activities, they participate in the discussion boards, they are great, they can give great insight and give answers, but they just want to work by themselves. They don't mind if they don't have to interact with others. To them, assessments aren't scary, and they do generally get very good marks. They will be happy to get involved in any online discussion, but it's not their preference. They're just the quiet achiever. The third group, the one we're called the juggler, that's where they're obviously busy people, and usually they have a lot going on in their life, whether that is family or work. And so they are trying to balance between doing study and work, or whatever their other aspect is. It may be looking after their family. For them, they need some very clear guidelines and very clear deadlines so that they can plan their commitments to get the jobs done, to get the assignments completed, etc. They do want things to be accessible to them at all times, and they do want the ability to put it on hold when they need to, should life get too busy for them. They'd like to put their study on hold temporarily for a period of time and then come back to it. We've got the fourth group there we refer to as the ghost. They are present, but they're invisible. They're the quiet type. That they don't really want to engage in that social aspect of study. They're not here for the good time. They're just here to get the work done. They like upskilling for work to get ahead. And again, interacting is not important to them. So they're low maintenance for most things, no fuss attitude. So they're pretty easy students to look after. And then you've got your last group, which we call the minimalist. They're similar to the quiet achievers. They just want to get things done, but they only want to do enough to get a pass and get their qualification. They are happy to coast through to do whatever is necessarily, and won't do anything extra. So anything like discussion boards or reflective tasks where it doesn't contribute to their assessment, they're most likely not to actually complete them. So the reason for unpacking those different personas is just to highlight that if we know the nature and characteristic of our learners, then it's important that we design the learning, the activities around their different needs. So the content design, the implementation approach needs to reflect or align the actual characteristics of those that are likely to study in that format. So I just thought that was important to highlight. What's been interesting, of course, is that with the impact of COVID-19, we've had to change the way we've delivered our training. So whilst TAFE Queensland had this strategy to move more of our programs into an online or flexible approach, certainly the COVID gave us, was a driver to do it sooner than what we had planned. So one major advantage of the flexible and online learning approach is that learning can continue without the disruption, even in events like COVID-19 pandemic. Because we're already teaching remotely, then these type of interruptions don't affect classes in the same way as what the traditional face-to-face classroom-based approaches did. So as you can see on screen, the 4 different delivery modes we were using, for those that were online, were not disrupted at all. There was no impact. It was just business as usual. For those that were delivering classes using mixed mode, there was a minor impact. We had to put more online and we had to provide more virtual classrooms, but they were already doing it, so it was easier to transition both students and teachers to doing more online delivery. It was those 2 in the middle. So those that were, their current arrangement was to come onto campus and go to a classroom and learn totally through that face-to-face delivery, as well as then our apprentices who again worked in the workplace or came to TAFE to work in our simulated workplaces. They were majorly disrupted. We had to totally change their courses and change the way to deliver. So there was a lot of planning and preparation that needed to occur to accommodate those 2. So, again, if we look at the benefits of an online or a blended learning approach, will be less disrupted if there were a major issue or event to occur. The last, just down the bottom there is, for us, for TAFE Queensland, that change that was driven by an unplanned disruption turned out to be a great opportunity for us, because it gave us, it really pushed along our plan much quicker. As I said, we had a 2-3-year plan. Because of COVID, we ended up having to transition to that more flexible much sooner. Also of interest is as many TAFE colleges as well as universities were required to move their instruction to that online delivery as part of the response to COVID. There was a bit of research that was undertaken capturing the students' preferences and access and the training. And what, as you can see on screen there, the research indicated that the completely online learning environments, which is what most of the students were transitioned into, did not necessarily suit all. That was not their preference. So nearly all students indicated they prefer to have at least some face-to-face contact, with the majority preferring their classes be mostly face-to-face. So what does that mean? It means that adopting a blended approach is possibly a better process than going to totally online. The exception there, as you can see, those students that are working full-time, so they're working more than 40 hours a week, for them, their preference was to be completely online, but the majority wanted to have at least some face-to-face. So again, I think that evidence is really useful to help inform any plans or strategies that you may have in moving away from that traditional TVET to a more online or technology-based TVET. It also identifies that face-to-face courses, you must provide that engaging and thoughtful learning experiences to get the student buy-in, because if not, if it's not their preference, then you actually may have students that either are not successful or leave the course. So again, there's two messages there. One is, if you're going to design, think about using blended learning approach, a mixed mode, some face-to-face with some virtual classrooms. And then secondly, in designing your virtual and your online learning, ensuring that it's engaging, because you need to ensure that you keep the students. You want them to be successful, and you do want them to complete their training. Okay, moving into taking you through some of the strategy that we undertook to move to the flexible and online learning processes. So one of the things we realized as part of our transition was that there are 4 distinct areas of readiness that are integral to success, and they need to all align. So there's system readiness, there's educator readiness, content readiness, and then student readiness. Before we unpack each of those pillars, I'd like to highlight that what I think is more important to consider when planning and designing a strategy to move to online is pedagogy. So pedagogy must underpin all planning, all design, and all development. Without having that thought out pedagogy, you could set yourself up for disaster. You do want to ensure that as you design and develop your online learning, that you are helping students to gain that deep grasp of fundamental learning content, but also how they can achieve that deeper learning and some of those higher learning, higher order skills, such as critical thinking. Students need to be comfortable with use of technology to help them learn and to access and to share and to create useful information. So again, as you design, you've got to think about the pedagogy, the how and why we're incorporating those particular learning activities. We look at those basic principles of it's important to embed communication, it's important to embed collaboration, it's important to embed interaction. So design the approach as well as design the learning content, keeping that pedagogy in mind. In terms of the 4 pillars, let's start with that system readiness. So we need to ensure that the system or the technology that is used will provide the functionality to enhance the delivery approach. So in particular, actions include the configuration of a learning management system or the other technology being used. The design has to meet the needs of the training packages themselves and of VET. So thinking about how the structure of the learning content is within the LMS, that aligns to then, what the curriculum is within a training package. What we found important was establishing or creating a set of e-standards to ensure consistency in the look and feel between the units and between qualifications. In particular, so that regardless of where the student studied, whether that was, in Brisbane or in far north Queensland, the student experience would be the same, that when they went into their online learning content, visually it'd look the same, the presentation was the same, that even within their course of study, that every unit looked the same. So again, familiarity with the ability to access the system itself. And then lastly there, the preparation of what we call unit offerings, which is each unit of study or course of study needed to be designed in a way or prepared to suit the different delivery mode and the student cohort. So meaning for those that might be studying using a total online, the unit offering had to suit that particular mode, as opposed to a student who was going in and studying then in a more face-to-face or blended approach. And similarly, the different student cohorts, say apprentices. So there would be slight variation with the different learner cohorts. Educator readiness was our second pillar. So obviously, to be able to manage the delivery of content in a technology based or online approach is highly reliant on the skills of the educator themselves. So there was a great variety in digital skills between educators. So part of our readiness is to ensure that we provide the training and professional development to enhance the digital skills. So a lot of that is around building their confidence as well as their capability. There's a great variation. We've got over or close to 2,000 educators, and so the variety within that group is quite large. The framework that we have developed is around 3 levels. So as you can see on screen there, level 1 is your introductory. So it's about the functionality within the system around the student experience. Then once that was completed, they would move on to level 2. Once that's completed, on to level 3. So as you can see, there's a scaffolding of the learning. There's a progression over time. As they gained or completed that training, obviously the permission levels of what they can do within the actual system increases as well. So different roles and different permission levels. The training needs to be focused or was focused on the pedagogy as opposed to just the use of the technology. If the educator doesn't understand the why they use that particular piece of technology or that function within the technology, then obviously they're not going to be able to provide the best learning experience. And I think the last one there just is about timing. So we did find and certainly recommend providing what we say is just-in-time training. In terms of preparation wise, they're more likely to remember the training and the information and the how-to if they've just done it, as opposed to doing it 6 months before or potentially 12 months before. We developed a number of different resources to support the educator training. This poster is just one of the many resources that we developed and provided. We found that short, sharp videos of not more than 15 minutes were the more ideal for online support. The ability to go back and watch the video, to stop the video, to try the technology at the same time is really helpful. Also interesting note, the feedback indicated most educators did like to attend face-to-face training and be able to ask questions. Although in saying that, a lot couldn't commit in terms of it being able to attend at some of the times that were scheduled. So our strategy was to provide a variety of different options on different days and different times throughout the day, and that way we could provide some training that suited most teachers. In terms of content readiness, so this is the information, the learning information that was provided within the actual learning management system. So part of our strategy was to create a unified product to market. So considerable investment was put into the development of that product, which included both the learning content and the assessment for every unit of competency for all training qualifications. The product strategy is managed through various product governance entities, and the engagement with industry is critical. So you're preparing students to work in industry, so therefore having industry input as to what the content is critical. So the 4 key steps that we undertook was firstly creation of the learning content for all units or quals, the contextualized customization of that content to meet then both industry and student needs, ensuring that the content that was developed had a lot of interactive activities. So this ties back to pedagogy. So the students need to do things. There needs to be variety. We need to engage them. It can't be just reading information on screen. So not only in the learning management system, but also other technology tools that were used need to be used in the right way, and they need to be interactive. Then lastly, making sure that we do undertake a quality assurance process before we released it and used it with the students. I'm just going to take you through, there's a couple of these is showing you some pictures of within our content management system. As you can see, that look and feel, easy navigation around the units of competency. So the learning resources, making sure that there's a lot of visuals to make it engaging, ensuring that there's a variety of modes. So there's some videos in there, not just visuals or reading. Putting in discussions to allow that communication and collaboration, reflective activities. Self-check is important. So students want to know how they are progressing. So those self-checks were important. And then enabling them opportunities to actually communicate with each other. So that can be through the discussion boards, as well as then last slide was around putting them into groups when they come together to do their virtual classroom, being able to put them in groups and allow them to work with each other. You know, it's easy when you're in a face-to-face because you can put them into groups and they work on a task. How do you manage that in a virtual classroom? To do so, being able to put them into little breakouts or groups within the Zoom is really important, and then similarly within the learning management system. Think of the pedagogy, provide materials that use the different mediums. You know, think about reading, images, videos, audio, incorporate their interactive activities, make sure there's something that they have to do, because that's how they'll learn best. Building opportunities to check for understanding, encourage them to reflect, to undertake further readings, provide access to other experts or information that they can access in their own time. Sorry, just going to flip through a couple of these pages here. Our last pillar is around student readiness. So equally important as preparing the educators for this delivery is preparing the students for this different way of studying as well. If they're used to doing face-to-face classes, they may not want to go to online, plus they may feel very uncomfortable or not confident with studying online. So it is important to prepare them and ensure that you're providing all of the resources and support and information you can to build that confidence, to provide guidance and clear guidance and instruction, as well as then outlining expectations. So again, that image on screen just shows you some screenshots of different components within our learning management system. So information about getting started. So when a student first goes in, they have that getting started page. There's little videos there that we provide. So how to navigate, Connect is our learning management system. So how to move around the online content, how to submit their assignments, how to communicate with yourself as well as others. So all of those are such critical components that you need to plan for, as opposed to just enrolling a student, putting them into the LMS and then expecting them to start online study. The other aspect to consider there, of course, is the technical requirements that are needed for online study. So this is giving the readiness phase is allowing them that opportunity to ensure that the technical requirements they need to operate and have access to the technology can be outlined as well. I won't play that one, but there's a lot of simple technology tools that you can use to create engaging learning content. They're not expensive, a lot of them are free, etc. But they just sort of, give you, that they're just a bit of variety and make them more interesting. So some of those that we use a lot is the Adobe Spark, which can either be just content that just rotates through, or you can convert it into a video and you can add audio to it. They're just simple components of Adobe. If you have the Adobe suite, it's quite easy to create those. We've created a large number of resources, both for students as well as teachers, in this preparation and transition phase. So I'm going to stop talking there. We're at the point where we're going to hand over to Sandy to look at some specific case studies. But are there any questions that have come through the chat room that you might like to ask before we advance to that stage?
Yes, thank you very much, Julie, for your presentation. Very interesting. Yes, and we already have some questions. Would you like to continue with the question now and then Sandy, or Sandy first? Or and then
if there's no, we're probably easier to address them at the end so that we can, in case there's more coming together. Yeah, unless there's something anyone wanted me to stop and go back or show a slide.
No, we don't have that. Okay, then. So then I think we can continue with Sandy.
Okie dokie. I'll hand over to Sandy.
Thank you.
So Sandy, are you able to talk, Sandy?
Yes. Hi, Sandy.
She's showing on mute at the moment.
Yeah, let me unmute. Let me check. Sebentar ya, Bapak Ibu.
Rightio. Okay, sorry about that. It was just taking a bit of a time to come through. Julie, you're happy to progress the slides for me? Thank you. Okay, so thank you everybody for the opportunity to chat with you today. I'm going to talk through a few of the examples of what's happened recently as we've moved many of our very practical qualifications into an online, as Julie's explained, a more mixed mode and facilitated learning experience in the online environment. So it's really I think I'll probably be answering quite a few of your questions as we go through as well. But I've put them around the case studies around the actual program. So the first one that I'd like to talk to you all about is fitness. We have our fitness programs, which is our personal trainer programs. And of course, you can appreciate how hands-on and practical and working with other people that sort of program is. And it was one of those programs where when we moved to the online environment as such, in response to this COVID, the direction given to everybody was, you know, think of the theory concepts that you can move forward and move the practical activities back in the timetable. But as you would all understand, in any vocational education and training environment, it's all around competency outcomes and the fact that the students need to be applying what they're learning in that practical context. So it was quite challenging for most of our programs to identify that. But the fitness people really found that this was a really successful venture for them. They went to teaching from their home gyms and using their home environments. But of course, we had to go through all of the processes, like for all of our programs, to ensure firstly that the students were able to access the training. Did they have the resources? Did they have the internet? And in all of our programs, which is not something that you would normally consider moving into a voluntary online learning environment, the students were obviously impacted by other considerations around you know, things that were happening in their own personal lives and in their families and in their home environment. So in all of the programs, we had to take that into consideration. But the fitness people really found that they retained their enrolments. Their students could organise themselves to be able to be working from home essentially and studying from home and continue to meet those sorts of commitments. And because they had to go through and structure the process to really engage the students and make sure the students were okay individually and as a group, and build those connections with their students. It wasn't just that they were turning up to class and they were present, but they had to actively engage with the students, that they found the online environment forced a lot of those practices, which was really rewarding for the teachers and for the students as well. It was also feedback that we got in many of our other programs, that because the students were timetabled and trained in how to use the technology and how to navigate the platform, and they all became very supportive of each other in, say, for example, Zoom meetings where teachers were learning on the hop as the students were, but because the teachers had to go through a very structured process of teaching the students how to use the tools and the technologies that we had, the students gave back in helping and supporting each other. So the key thing that I really appreciated out of all of this learning from the teachers and the feedback they were giving us is that these are skills that the students are going to need in the workforce. So it wasn't just about learning these skills in response to this particular COVID activity, and it isn't just about moving them into that online environment because we feel that's the best way students learn. It's about learning how to learn for the lifelong experience as well, and learning how to utilize these skills in their environment. So this is where it was particularly important to fitness. What we saw in Australia and what we saw in our programs is these students have to be personal trainers for a variety of clients, and they took that online as well as taking their study online. So they were able to still maintain connection with their fitness, their personal trainer clients, and they were able to demonstrate a lot of the processes and the assessments through their work practices as well. So that was a real bonus that came out of the fitness program itself, on how much that they could still support their clients in their businesses in this online environment, as well as continue with the learning. If you want to take me to the next slide, thanks, Julie. Hairdressing was a really interesting one, and I suppose I'll just seeing one of the questions there on the teacher lead up. As you can imagine, hairdressing is very practical, hands-on, and this is a program where they had a specific challenge in trying to separate theory from practice, because they taught their students in the salon, and the picture that you can see on the screen is one of our TAFE campus salons. That the students do all of their learning in that context and in that environment. The apprentices are coming in from industry and from salons and services, and they're coming into our TAFE salon and learning. So everything that they did was a very contextualized learning experience in the practice. You would see the students sitting around the rooms with their learner guides and working through theory-based activities, but in that practical setting. So they were very challenged at the start on how they were going to separate, as we said, theory from practice, and it's really quite difficult for any industry to really separate that in the longer term. One of the particular challenges that our teachers and students faced at the start was many of the students didn't even have a laptop. And didn't have access to a laptop. It was part of their agreement that the salons would provide them access, but a lot of them lost their jobs in their apprenticeships and traineeships at the start of COVID because the salons were shutting down. So that was a challenge that we had on how do we get the services and the facilities available to the students to continue. And that was part of the planning of the teachers, that they had to work out, as Julie indicated, how they could work through the learner guides and support the students in the phone context rather than the online context. Having said that, it was much more of an isolated case, or individual case, I should say, student by student. And in that circumstance, you know, you adjust the program and the delivery accordingly. We had to also look at where the students had access to, like the practice heads or the hair, where they could do a lot of the application at home, the safety of the environment they were working in. Did they have access to resources? So it was a lot of work for the teachers at the start to work out exactly what they could address in that particular process, and then what would have to be reinforced and assessed once they came back into the training environment in that more face-to-face context. So that was an example of where it's that planning process of working out what you can cover, what you can teach, and how you can teach that in the online environment, and what still has to be done in the real work context, be that at TAFE face-to-face or in industry. But what really did show is that and I'll talk about this a bit more, but when they're working side by side, or watching a teacher do training and demonstrations, it's a very one-on-one sort of process. It's very hard for a class of 20 or 25 students to watch a teacher do something. They need to be very close. And that's where we realised in hairdressing, that's where the benefit of videos would come to the fore, where teachers could demonstrate particular skills and processes and activities in the practical sense, that is. And it could be on a hair assessment, it could be on upstyling, it could be in cutting techniques. And if they could video it in a way that the student could see the teacher's perspective, then they can provide those videos out to the students. And whilst the students can't practice and can't demonstrate, they can still see the application of the theory, and they can still witness that, and the learning experience continues. It doesn't stop for them, and it's not disjointed. And then they can get to the point where they can come back in and practice and demonstrate that themselves in the real environment, if they don't have the equipment, the resources, or the models, or the opportunities to do that. So this is where, again, coming back to what Julie was saying, we're building a lot of really excellent flexible resources that can be used continuously moving forward, so that the students aren't reliant on being in the classroom and seeing the teacher do something. They can observe it through the videos, and the benefit of the videos is that repetition. They can go back and watch them time and time again until they get to the point where they can practice that. I think the other thing too is we're really getting into the practice now of working really closely with industry, excuse me, in order for them to be able to support their apprentices and trainees where we can't. So it's really providing opportunities for greater conversations with industry. Now that the hairdressing salons are back open, excuse me just for a second.
Sebentar ya Bapak Ibu, ini lagi ada gangguan koneksi sebentar.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realise that would happen.
Yes, welcome back,
Just
Sandy.
didn't need to experience me coughing. Okay, so the hairdressing, as I was saying, it really gave us the opportunity to work closely with industry. So where the industry could let the students practice, give them access to resources and activities, it was a lot more conversation around that. And then as we're moving forward now, where they can really practice. Sorry, thank you. Julie, if you can take me to the next slide, please. Cookery, this was amazing work that the cookery teachers did. It was really exciting and they were very excited themselves about this. So you can imagine that hospitality and cookery teachers are very passionate about being in the kitchens with the students. And the real challenge that we have with the cookery programs is that the students need to demonstrate X number of meals or services in commercial kitchens. And because, you know, all of the restaurants were closed and our kitchens were closed and our classes were closed, the students couldn't demonstrate that. But the reality was it didn't mean that the learning had to stop. And that picture that you see on the screen there is actually in the home kitchen of the chef on the right of the picture. So they were teaching from their kitchens. They were demonstrating all of the meal prep and the ingredients prep and the safety. They did all of the safety checks at the start, of course, and they were really excited because they were bringing it from a really personal perspective at this stage, rather than 20 students in a massive commercial kitchen and trying to see what everybody individually was doing. They could really get in and provide some really personal demonstrations. They recorded these demonstrations and they put them out for the students to watch and critique. But what was great as well is the students started demonstrating and recording their own cooking sessions, and it was that real collaborative approach to the cooking process, and the passion for the cooking just shone through every day. It was just amazing to see. They also took the opportunity, because restaurants were closed, they could bring in lots of guest speakers and guest chefs and have lots of guest demonstrations. And that was the same we were saying in a lot of our programs where industries had shut down because of COVID. Take the opportunity to use that expertise and bring it in so that the students got the benefit of not just seeing our fabulous chefs and what they were doing in their own kitchens, but a lot of other chefs and restaurant owners and guest speakers in general as well. So it was just amazing. The other thing that we really talked about in hairdressing, but it was really obvious in cookery, because they can't be assessed right now because they're not working in commercial kitchens and producing, you know, meals for a number of customers at the particular time, it again meant that the learning didn't stop. So what the teachers really looked at doing was that concept of clustering, of taking what could be taught out of the individual units and teaching that content and getting the students to practice and apply. And this is what I just really loved hearing from them, that the students were actually engaging in the learning experience, not just doing something to be assessed, but they were actually exploring and demonstrating and making mistakes and working collaboratively to discuss things and critique each other's processes, so that when they do eventually come back into our commercial kitchen setting and can be assessed, they've had that ample opportunity to practice, and then they can apply it when they come into their assessment time in the kitchen. So it wasn't so much moving the theory forward and the practice back, it was more moving the learning forward and the assessment back, and that's what they're looking forward to. And it really does lend itself, like in that process of clustering, that we don't do things in isolation. We don't do cutting up and preparation on one day and cooking on another day. It all comes into the one activity. So they're really looking at that holistic cookery assessment process once they get back into the commercial kitchens at the end. So that was really, really exciting to see coming through. I think what was really important also in the cookery, and I had this confirmed by our work health and safety regulator, how did all of the teachers address the work health and safety requirements in their delivery. And cookery is a really great example where there is such a risk assessment process involved as soon as you go into any kitchen, but let alone any individual person's kitchen, and how are they ensuring that they're making sure that they're safe at all times, and those sorts of things. So it was a really important process that they go through. Okay, we've got 10 minutes. So yes, 10 minutes, it won't take me that long. All good. But again, we've created a whole bunch of resources that we can continue to use. And I think what's the great thing that came out of the cookery, I think, was the passion and the engagement with the students, that they really took that on board and were excited about doing things in their own space and place, and feeling that they had that opportunity to practice, which was really good. Next. I think the next one, I'm hoping it's beauty. Oh yes, this was an amazing experience, even just yesterday. The beauty teachers, again, you can imagine, very hands-on activities where students are applying their learning to a person. So it's not like they could keep that distance between that. And they were very challenged initially because they do the same as hairdressing. They teach everything in context. All of the learning happens in the beauty salon. But I was just talking to one of the teachers yesterday, and we've had an article published in a local magazine here, because the students just finished, her students just finished their makeup unit, and she taught it completely online from beginning to end. I think what was one of the magic parts of the beauty program right at the start when COVID happened, the students are not used to being online. They were nothing was delivered online before. They everything was paper-based and in the salon. So the teacher at the start just said her only thing that she did was she got them into Zoom and she just had a chat with them. She just got the students in a few days after we'd all closed down, and just said hello. And just checked in with them. There was no talk at the start about anything to do with beauty or the program or the assessment or the content or the learning. She just connected with the students and checked in to see how they all were individually and how they were as a group, how they were feeling, and where they were at personally at that time. And then she made another session to talk about where we're going to next and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, to introduce them into the technology very slowly. But what was amazing is the feedback that she got back from the students, the thank you for just checking in with us, to just be connected. And that's what the students across the board have said ever since, is that they feel a greater connection. You can sit in a classroom with 20 other students and never speak to anyone else. Whereas in this online delivery, that they have been put into opportunities and given the skills and knowledge to work together and forced to make those connections and have those interactions and work collaboratively. So she said the social learning that occurred in her program was amazing. And the students demonstrated everything they needed. They did the photo shoots to capture where there is one on the screen there for you to see. And they did a big photo shoot of the students individually of their makeup so that they could publish that. And so she felt such a sense of achievement, as did her students, that they were able to complete a whole unit from introduction to a completely new online learning system. With that student support, that is just crucial. You can't do any of that if the students aren't there to engage with and feel supported, and to get to the point where they could be assessed and celebrating the success. They've been published in a variety of forums, including Facebook. And I think the last one there, Julie, is the automotive. Automotive were particularly challenged again, and all of the same issues that the other programs have talked to. I think that the three that I'll talk to mostly is they used, we bought a pair of point of view glasses, which have the recording camera in the nose piece of the glasses, and they have the microphones in the earpieces, so that the teachers could create videos from their point of view. And again, it's the same challenge, that where the students are standing around a vehicle, they can't see fully and clearly, whereas if we can create recordings of what the teachers are doing and how they're using equipment and how they're attending to various sections of the car, those resources are available and the students can revisit them. The students were really challenged in automotive. Obviously, they don't all have a safe work environment at home, or vehicles or opportunities to engage, and they don't have the equipment to do that. So it was really about working out, again, what they could work on and what they could do when they went back to work or came back to class. There was a lot of challenges around, we have a lot of school age students and the teachers expected them to be in class, so to speak, and be attending class as such, like for a full 7 hours. And that's one of the things that we talked about. You can't just replace your 7-hour day class with a 7-hour Zoom session. It doesn't work that way. So we had to look at ways that we could chunk up the information, and as Julie spoke about, how we can get that information out to the students, how the students can engage with that information, and then what can we use those facilitated sessions online, those synchronous sessions, the Zoom sessions or the Skype sessions, whatever they might be, how can we use them to the best of the effect of the learning? And it was really pushing the teachers back into that facilitating the learning process, not just bringing them into a Zoom session to do an assessment. And as you can see from today, just because your videos are all on or off does not indicate whether you're participating or engaging or not. It's about the engagement between the teacher and the student, the student and the student, and the student and the content. And that's the three sort of levels of engagement that we're looking at in facilitating that particular learning. So I think that's enough from me. I think we now have the time for, we won't go on to those other slides, Julie. We'll go to the questions now. I'm assuming we'll give you the presentation so you can read and see and watch those videos again. So back to, do we want to look at the questions there?
Oke, terima kasih banyak Sandy. Thank you very much Julie and Sandy.
You're more than welcome. I think, can you put Julie back on the microphone?
I will try
as well?
to summarize the question in Indonesian language, and then you can listen to the interpreter. I hope this is okay with you.
Can you just give Julie microphone rights as well, please?
Baik, ya. Julie? Ya. Hi, Julie.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
back.
That's good. Yeah. So we're going to continue the question and answer session.
Mm-hmm.
Ya. Ada banyak sekali pertanyaan sebenarnya yang masuk, tapi saya coba rangkum ya Bapak Ibu dan saya akan sampaikan, nanti bisa Ibu Julie maupun Ibu Sandy yang menjawab. Pertanyaan yang pertama, tadi ada presentasi yang sangat menarik mengenai tipe-tipe pembelajarnya atau tipe-tipe studentnya gitu, dan ini banyak sekali yang komentar soal itu. Terkait dengan hal itu, pertanyaannya adalah ketika menentukan apakah proses pembelajaran itu akan bersifat online atau offline atau blended, sebenarnya lebih ditentukan oleh tipe si pembelajarnya atau lebih ditentukan dari kompetensi yang hendak dipelajari atau kombinasi keduanya? Itu pertanyaan yang pertama. Silakan. Ya. Do you want to answer? Yeah. Or the competency? Hello, Julie?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let me repeat the question. So one of the type of the learner, the 5 types were very interesting. A lot of participants were responding to that. But the question is, should we select? Should we decide that we want to use an online learning or a blended learning or an offline learning? Should we decide on that based only on the type of the learner, or only based on the type of skills that we want to teach, or based on both, or based on what?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Look, I think you need to base it on both. I think the types of learners, understanding what learners want and how they want to learn is really important, because that's going to, if you can design your learning content as well as activities around that, you've got more likelihood of success. I would strongly recommend more of a blended approach, because that way it gives variety. So therefore you can accommodate the different types of learners. So blended allows for those that are the quiets and the someone to do their work online, but it also gives, because you're also blending it with some of that direct interaction through the virtual classrooms, etc., allows then the opportunity to promote that interaction, and you're going to better accommodate those that prefer that method of learning and so on. Ensuring that the learning content is engaging and it's interactive and it includes some communication and collaboration. Again, the more you can do and the more variety you can provide, the better you can cater for that range, the 5 different types. You can't design a delivery strategy for each of them. You're having to deliver it, design it so it accommodates all, if that makes sense. So, what suits, thinking at breaking the content. So start with like the competency and the content and what needs to be achieved. Then thinking about what part of that content best suits an online method where they can read, do, watch type activities, and then separating what needs to be directly instructed by a teacher. So therefore you just separate the content. So that's probably part of our planning phase, is just getting the units of competency, the curriculum, having a look at all the content that's in there. What is the knowledge that they need to develop? What is the skills they need to develop? Then it's like, of that knowledge component, what could we put online that the students are required to read, do apply, do some activities there. And then what is the critical component where I need a teacher in front of them? Is that through then a classroom? Do we need access to classrooms or facilities? So the nursing lab, for example, that means that that's the part that we do face-to-face on campus. Then what can I do through the virtual platform? I can still instruct, demo, show videos, etc. through the virtual. So it's just trying to piece it together. So your planning and design is the most critical of all. Sandy, is there anything you want to add?
I think what I said earlier around it's understanding how everybody works in industry these days as well. So it's coming back to the thing where we shouldn't be catering to individual learning styles. We should be more encouraging students to learn in all different ways.
Yep.
And that they then understand the more reluctant person to the book person that likes to read and do, but they have to read policies and procedures. So it's teaching them how to learn in a variety of ways. And I also think too, it's maximising the time that you have with the students. So when you do have that time where you can be with the student, it's not wading through theory. It's about practically doing bits and pieces and coaching and moulding them. So I think that's the key. But yes, we do have a lot of students that say, I don't like the book. I don't like the online. But that doesn't mean that we should cater to that. Does that make sense? It's we should be teaching them what they're getting out of learning that way, and putting the responsibility back on the student to do the learning, and the information's given to them in a variety of modes.
Okay, thank you. Sebenarnya Ibu Juli sudah menjawab pertanyaan kedua gitu, karena pertanyaan berikutnya adalah bagaimana ketika ada materi-materi yang tampaknya tidak bisa diberikan secara online atau secara daring gitu. Tapi mungkin terkait dengan hal ini pertanyaan yang lebih spesifik adalah bagaimana dengan pendidikan vokasional atau vocational education. Itu pendidikan vokasional itu banyak sekali prakteknya, terutama ketika mau melakukan penilaian atau assessment itu juga biasanya berupa praktek. Jadi beberapa peserta menanyakan tampaknya apakah memungkinkan gitu kalau benar-benar 100% online gitu kalau kita berbicara mengenai pendidikan vokasional.
I think that also answers off the question around designing blended learning.
Yeah. So Julie?
Yes.
Or Sandy, yeah. So the next question is is it possible for vocational training to be 100% online? Because as we know, when we talk about vocational education, they're usually practicum sessions, that people actually has to do what they learn. So is it possible? And then most importantly, how to do the assessment to know that the learners have actually learned what they should be learning?
Yes, that's a very good question. I'd say in some industry areas, no, it's impossible to do it 100% online. There are some exceptions to that. For example, maybe finance, Sandy, IT, library, business, some of those, yes, you could get away with not having to bring them in and do anything in person. Majority of the qualifications that especially if they're trade-based, you need to have some sort of practical skills component and practical skills assessment. So therefore, there's a requirement they either is on-the-job training through their workplace or bringing them into campuses to teach them the practical skills and then assess them.
Okay.
Even in that respect, though, like we do training overseas. So remotely overseas. And I know, as Julie was saying, even in our business finance ones, they still have to demonstrate skills and communication skills and teamwork, but they do it through videos because we are still seeing that they can do those tasks and demonstrate those tasks. But as Julie said, in some industries, they mandate that, you know, it must be in a live work situation with, it depends entirely on the qualification, on what the units of competency and the assessment conditions say. But yeah, like we can teach trainer and assessor, which is what this one is sort of essentially about. We can teach that completely online because the students can give us videos of what they're demonstrating.
Okay. You're talking about the industries, and that relates to the next question. You talk a lot about the importance of working with the industry in developing a learning program, not only online, but any learning program, you should be working with the industry. Could you maybe share with the participant a little bit more on how do you do that? How do you work with the industry to make sure that the learning program is in line with what they need?
I'll let
Julie?
Sandy, as the expert with the product lead.
It is a mandated process that we have to go through when we develop our training and assessment strategy. We have to get industry consultation. We've got a checklist, a survey that we talk through with various people in the industry about what skills and knowledge need to be learnt and demonstrated, and how they need to be demonstrated within the industry. And so that way we tailor our learning and assessment resources to suit that as well. And we have those conversations. The teachers have those conversations with industry when they go out and do their industry currency activities. All of our teachers get 5 days a year to go out and work in industry and find out what's happening and update their skills and their currency and their knowledge, but also to look at what are the new and emerging trends. So the teachers do that. The teachers also do that whenever they create a regional training and assessment strategy. So I create the master, and when I create the master, we have a conference once a year where we pull people from industry and all of our teachers in together into certain activities and guest speakers, and we get a lot of that information happening there. But the teachers are also responsible for doing that when they're talking to their local industry people, and that way we just always ensure that the feedback is applied and put into practice, and that we say to the students as well, this is what industry is saying to us, this is what industry wants from you. We also have the fact, as Julie talked to, when we have students doing training out in industry and working, our hairdressers, for example, they go out every week to visit salons, and they will be talking to the employers as they're out there and making sure that the employers agree with the ways that we're assessing and delivering content and the activities that the students are doing. So it's just part and parcel of what our teachers are doing pretty much every day as best that we can. It might just be an indirect comment, or it might be a phone call to an employer, or it could be a structured interview, or it could be the conference. So we've got lots of avenues. And the other thing too is we share that feedback that I might get from one teacher with all of my teachers across the state, so that everybody sees the different concepts that are coming through.
And we work very closely with industry when we place our students there. They do some practical experience. Obviously, that's an opportunity for them to see how skilled our students are, and then to provide feedback through that. So I think that we have a lot of situations where it's like co-delivery, co-assessment to a degree.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandy. Yes, so the next question, we have a lot of questions coming in from the side of the instructor or the teacher. So so a lot of the participants here are instructor, or teacher from different education institutions. And as I'm sure you are aware, one of the challenges of online learning is maintaining the learners or the students. So the question is, what should the instructor do? What should we do to make sure that students are engaged and are motivated throughout the learning program.
Yeah. I'll go first. So I think there's a lot, especially I'm reading that question, and it talks about that synchronous virtual classroom situation. You know, the big mistake would be if you just brought them in there and all you did was talk to them, similar to what we're doing now. You know, you need to make them do something. So, you know, that's where the use of the breakout rooms, the whiteboards, the polls, getting them to even read this, write something, do it, then come together and share what you've recorded there, or what's your summary. It's like you want to make sure they're doing something. And I think that's the critical, whatever that doing may be. So yeah, I think there's a number of different strategies you can use, but if you just keep that underpinning concept of being, what do you want them to do? What's the content I'm trying to get across? What do I want them to do? What can they do with it? What's an activity where I can get them becoming active in the learning process? Sandy?
The only thing I'd add to that is making it real tasks, not getting them to do things just for the sake of doing something, but getting them, teaching them the learning skills. There's the one I've got recently is we get our students to watch videos and watch links and research and blah, 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 but there's nothing that comes out of that. And, you know, the research is showing that you have to physically be, you know, writing or drawing to make the connections in your brain. So it's about giving them real work tasks that are useful to them, you know. And I think that one of the really good ones that, well, the more interesting ones that are coming up now is the use of discussion forums. You know, watch this video and then feed into this discussion forum, and then the students engage each other. You know, you're building that community of learning, you're building that network, they're starting to talk to each other. And I think the other thing that we can do as a teacher, a facilitator, is respond to that. Whenever students make an effort, reward them for it, you know, and what they get out of it. So it's the two things there, building that collaborative learning so that the students are learning from each other. And secondly, making it real, that it's productive for them, that they can see the purpose of doing those activities.
Yeah. And I think making them accountable as well, so that they're not just, you know, they're passive, that we want them to get active. So making them accountable for them to understand that, you know, you're going to do something, then you're going to write something, and I want you to put it into the chat room or put it into that, so that it actually then appears. And so they can't be just sitting back listening or doing nothing or walking away, turning their camera off and walking away, you know, that they're actually there and present and engaged.
And responsible to the other people in the group, not just to you or to the program, but, you know, to support their peers. And that's what happens out in the workforce. You know, it's the accountability of engaging and participating isn't just to get your competency result at the end. It's to be a productive team member and to make them consciously aware of that. You know, this is the ground rules and the expectation.
Yeah.
Probably one other to add to that, and it's in particular with blended learning, where the statement I made before, that think about the content that they can do in their own, read or do in their own time, and then, you know, so that you're maximizing the time where you're interacting with them synchronously. But if there's not a connection between the two, that there's a problem. So, you know, the accountability is lost. So when you direct them to go and read this, do this, whatever, and come to our class prepared with a whatever, so that there's an activity that they've got to do and it connects up to what the face-to-face connection is, I think that's really important. They've got to tie in and they've got to be relevant.
Okay. Okay, so we still have more questions, but before, because we still have time, but before that, maybe I would like to just summarize and talk in Indonesian language for the participants. Yes. Baik, Bapak Ibu, saya coba rangkum dulu sebelum kita lanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Gitu. Tadi banyak sekali ya pertanyaan Bapak Ibu dan tanggapan-tanggapan yang menarik, kita bisa lihat dari ruang chat. Kalau merangkum pertanyaan dan juga jawaban yang tadi kita sudah dengarkan, yang pertama adalah sebenarnya ketika menentukan pembelajaran secara online atau offline atau blended, itu baiknya kita mempertimbangkan bukan hanya tipe pelajarnya yang tadi ada 5 itu, tapi juga mempertimbangkan sebenarnya apa yang mau kita ajarkan atau apa yang mau kita sampaikan. Itu yang pertama. Kemudian keterlibatan industri itu sangat amat penting untuk memastikan bahwa apa yang diajarkan itu sesuai dengan kebutuhan industri. Kalau di Australia tadi memang sudah diceritakan ya, mereka memang punya mekanismenya sendiri bagaimana selalu untuk berkomunikasi dan mendapat masukan dari industri. Kalau Bapak Ibu ada yang ikut sesi pertama, sebenarnya mekanisme kerjasama ini juga sudah dibahas di sesi 1. Ya secara lebih detail bagaimana selalu ada komunikasi antara institusi pendidikan dengan industri. Untuk Bapak Ibu yang mungkin tidak ikut sesi 1, bisa mengakses presentasinya nanti di websitenya ILO, nanti yang akan kami beritahukan di akhir sesi webinar ini. Kemudian tadi banyak sekali juga di sini Bapak Ibu yang tampaknya memang pengajar ya, jadi banyak pertanyaannya, bagaimana sih caranya supaya murid atau pembelajar online itu bisa terus tertarik gitu ya. Jadi karena kan mereka belajar sendiri dari jarak jauh seperti itu. Dan tadi disampaikan dan ditegaskan bahwa nggak bisa tuh mereka cuma disuruh baca aja gitu. Jadi harus ada tugas-tugas untuk memastikan mereka memang benar-benar terlibat. Jadi ada tugas yang dikerjain sendiri, kemudian ada juga tugas yang memang harus berinteraksi juga gitu dengan peserta lain atau harus berinteraksi dengan si gurunya sehingga mereka terus-menerus aktif. Kalau saya bisa menambahkan dari pengalaman ILO atau saya bisa mencontohkan, saya yakin Bapak Ibu kalau ikut workshop offline nih sebelum COVID gitu ya, kan kita sering ikut workshop, terus diskusi, terus nanti di tembok tuh ada flip chart, terus kita harus nempel-nempel post-it gitu ya, kertas-kertas berwarna gitu. Misalnya ditanya apa keuntungan dari pembelajaran online, terus kita disuruh nempel pakai kertas warna merah gitu. Kemudian apa sedangkan kekurangannya, kemudian kita suruh nempel pakai kertas warna biru gitu. Nah kalau offline gampang ya, kita kebayang bagaimana melakukannya, terus kita maju ke depan, kita nempel-nempel. Dan itu adalah salah satu bentuk bagaimana kita berpartisipasi aktif gitu. Setelah itu kita diskusi dengan peserta yang lain. Nah sebenarnya secara online itu juga bisa dilakukan hal yang sama. Banyak sekali tools-tools di internet itu yang bentuknya persis kayak flip chart, kemudian juga ada post-it-post-itnya, ada kertas-kertas bergambarnya, cuman online. Tapi tampilannya sama persis. Itu ada. Jadi kalau misalnya Bapak Ibu seneng yang kayak gitu, sebenarnya tinggal dibuat aja gitu, tapi online. Suruh peserta masang post-it-nya tapi online. Terus nanti kelihatan post-it-nya teman-teman sekelasnya itu kelihatan. Setelah itu untuk memastikan ada partisipasi, bisa dibilang Anda baru akan mendapatkan nilai untuk modul ini, atau Anda baru dianggap selesai modul ini kalau Anda menanggapi post-it orang lain. Itu bisa. Tadi sempat disebutkan oleh Sandy dan Heli, pastikan, dan Julie, pastikan bahwa memang ada interaksi. Itu contoh dari saya saja. Baik, itu rangkuman untuk sesi pertanyaan pertama. Saya akan lanjut dengan pertanyaan berikutnya. So, Julie and Sandy, are you there?
Yes.
I can see another question in the chat there. Do you mind if I respond to that? It said, asked us if I could give a case study of what we learned about the checklist in the industry support, and I've got a really good one. It was for the Cert 4 in accounting and bookkeeping. When we were looking at the new program for that, and we had industry consultation previously. We pulled quite a few people through and asked them what skills they felt the students really needed, and they talked then about legal and an understanding of legal and ethical boundaries and guidelines and factors. And then I went out to specific industries and I spoke to a bookkeeper and I spoke to a gentleman that worked in a bank, and I spoke to a couple of other chartered accountants as well. And I said to them, this is the feedback that we've got, that you need, your people need legal ethical training. And they said, yes, if you just take the fact that Australia had a royal commission into the banking system, you know. So that was where we're taking industry events, but talking specifically to bank managers and accountants. And it was really interesting because they said, yes, they need the skills and knowledge and understanding, but they won't be the people having the conversations with and clients, because that is a higher level in the business. But it was a really good example of where everybody at all levels in the business need that understanding. So when I said we have an activity where they have to have a conversation with a client about a scenario and explain the legal and ethical implications and reference that, they said, yes, it will have to be a simulated assessment, because in industry, they will never be allowed to talk to clients about these issues. So it's where we find the balance in the skills and knowledge that they need, and the way we assess that, it had to be in a simulated environment. It would never be. And in that case, that's where we can't put, finance is probably a good example where we can't put people out in industry as placement, because they're not allowed to do those tasks in that business because of privacy, confidentiality, and legal and ethical implications. So we have to set up really good simulated activities for them to do, so that we can assess those skills. But the checklist is just asking, we say to our teachers, don't give the industry the checklist, because it's in educational speak and they don't know what we're talking about. So we have to interpret it for them. So that's where we have the conversation, where we say, what are the skills that you want your people to have? What's the knowledge that you want your people to have? What are the activities that you want your people to be able to do? And then we go and map that to the curriculum to make sure that our students are coming out work ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for Sandy for adding that up. So the next question for Julie and Sandy is that you already mentioned it in your presentation. Yeah, but we want to ask more. So as you know that Indonesia is it's a very big country. It consists of thousands of islands, and we still have many remote areas with limited internet connectivity, and sometimes, let alone internet, sometimes with limited electricity. So, and you mentioned earlier that you too have more remote areas where you have to reach students. So can you share a little bit more, how do you ensure that you can deliver quality skills training to these people in the more remote areas, especially when there are no internet connection? How do you do that?
I think that's where the adaptations are needed. So there are a couple of different ways we might manage that. Firstly would be recording of the sessions so that they become video recordings. Therefore, you're not necessarily relying then on internet access. They don't have to do it live. They get a recording and they listen to that video recording. That's assuming that, you know, they actually have computers and have the ability to sort of access computers at least. I think the other part of it is, in some instances with our remote areas, they come in for what we call a residential. So they do a lot of the learning in their own time, self-paced, etc. And then they come in for a week and they do a residential, and that might be around, it could be community services, nursing. There's a few different industry areas where that occurs. It does mean they have to have the ability to be, you know, come in. They have to have flexibility to attend in person. But that in particular is important in the skill-based qualifications. I guess the other part would be always, for accessibility reasons, any of our content that is sitting in the learning management system in that digital format can be downloaded into a paper-based and can be provided to them. So if they had no internet access, had no access to technology at all, that would be the way we would manage it. They would have to then, in terms of the development of skill, either be placed in a workplace, you know, locally, or come in for a residential. Sandy, anything to add?
No, I think when we talked about this with the hairdressing student, in the end, we said to them, because there's just certain elements where they have to engage in those skills, they have to research things. So where if they would have been provided it at the workforce, they could come into TAFE and use the TAFE facilities. And we have our TAFE scattered across all of our areas. So yes, it might be hours away, but it's still in that fact of you might have to plan to go in, as Julie said, for a couple of days to use the technology and the facilities at the campus. I haven't come across anything now that any program yet, I should say, where there isn't a requirement at some point to be using the technology in the industry. I mean, even in our trades, you know, they should be using ordering systems or planning systems or technology, and it comes back again to what's required in the unit of competency. If the unit of competency requires them to access and research and look up and find, that we're going to have to provide the facilities for them to do that at some point.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie and Sandy. I think I'm going to give you the last question now. You also mentioned a little bit about how TAFE was once providing only offline learning program, and then you transition into providing both offline and online learning program. So and because there are many education institution here as participants, that one of the many questions regarding that that thing is that how long did you transition from providing offline program into an online learning, and how long and how and what is the cost, so how to do that? So there's still a lot of questions about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big question, and you know, I think it depends on how many programs for a start. That's going to be a critical factor. If we reflect on what we called our master product strategy, that was really an investment over, say, a 3-year period. And so it was a transitional plan. Obviously, the programs that had the higher enrollments were the prioritised programs. They were the ones we did first. But you know, over 3 years would be just as a rough guide, but we still are at the point where not all of our programs are in that format, but the majority of our students studying, 70% of our students studying have got, you know, they're in qualifications that were part of that transition program. In terms of dollars, the investment was over 3 years, 25 million. To get to that point, and then there's an ongoing cost of 2.3 million per annum just in continuous improvement and ongoing license arrangements, etc. So it's not a cheap investment. I guess that the key tips there is it's about planning, and in planning that, think about going back to the 4 pillars and the components of it. And in terms of the educator readiness, is making sure that you plan the training of the educators to align to the release of the product in the system. That, you know, you don't want to have one coming before the other, you know what I mean? So if if we are working towards that learning and content and the assessment will be written in 6 months' time, then you think about then working backwards from that release date as to when you train the educators, so that again it's just in time, they're supported to transition towards that. Have I answered all of the questions? So how long? 3 years, costs, what did I miss out, Sandy?
No, I was just thinking, if we think about
Waktu,
COVID,
biaya, berapa lama, dan time, how long, the cost, and who to involve in the process.
yeah, I think we
Yeah.
covered that.
Yeah, I think who to involve, you know, there's got to be an upfront planning session, and that's where obviously you need to be reflecting on what does the training packages, the curriculum state, engage with industry to know what they want, devise the plan as to how you will develop, integrate and release. So it's engagement of all the stakeholders involved. So it's, you know, you've got to involve all stakeholders, including, you know, I know someone said in the chat there about the skills organisations, you know, getting input from industry and the skills organisation. Sandy, any?
Yeah.
No, I think yeah, I think that's essentially it. If you look at it in our COVID response, that was 2 weeks, you know, and it was everyone the technology and getting the teachers onto the technology and then getting the students onto the technology. And that was intense, you know, it was amazing. And it was, but can I just reaffirm, it's the planning. It's the plan. You can't just go smack bang over. It's the planning of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to support the students, how you're going to build the content, how you're going to support the teachers. It is, the planning is crucial. And you slow that down with the students as well. And you say, which is what we've done now with this COVID response, we're extending stuff out. Yes, it's going to hurt us all financially and whatever for a time, but it's the outcomes for the students that you want. So you need to make sure they're comfortable, they've got the facilities, the teachers are comfortable, they've got the equipment, and it's planned through.
And that's a really good point, that through COVID, in that preparation phase, it was a matter of 2 to 3 weeks only. It was very intense. Probably the big difference between the two is the development of resources. So, you know, if there's no development of resources needed, you can do it in a much shorter period of time.
Okay. So thank you very much. Ya, jadi Bapak Ibu tadi kalau saya bisa rangkum kembali gitu ya, karena kita waktunya sudah mau habis. Kalau bicara, karena tadi lumayan juga ada beberapa pertanyaan, kalau mau bicara bagaimana kemudian kita bertransisi dari offline menjadi online, tadi kalau dari pengalaman TAFE itu adalah 2-3 tahun. Gitu. Dan biaya yang mereka keluarkan tadi adalah 25 juta dolar Australia, kalau dirupiahkan itu sekitar 250 miliar gitu. Ini kan contoh saja. Yang penting tadi dikatakan bahwa pilih dulu mana program yang akan banyak pesertanya, mulai dari situ dulu, kemudian pelan-pelan. Kalau di situasi COVID tadi dinyatakan bahwa memang jadi beda ya, karena harus serba buru-buru gitu, harus cepat-cepat mengubah menjadi online. Sedangkan tadi yang sharing mengenai biaya, proses dan sebagainya itu memang sudah dilakukan dulu sebelum ada COVID gitu. Baik Bapak Ibu, karena waktunya sudah jam 12 nih tepatnya, mungkin saya coba rangkum. Dan sebelumnya saya akan sampaikan terima kasih kepada Julie dan Sandy yang sudah sore di sana dan sudah berbagi pengalamannya dan keahliannya. Kami senang sekali bisa mendengarkan pengalaman dari Australia. Sebelum ditutup, mungkin Julie atau Sandy ada kata-kata terakhir? Do you have any last thing you want to say, Julie or Sandy, before?
No, I just on the slides there are two, just in closing there, the lessons learned. I won't, you know, necessarily go through all of it, but I think if you just, you know, the participants just have a read of that, I think there are some good takeaways there in terms of lessons learned. Don't estimate the time frames. Ensure the content meets the delivery needs that are required by students in industry. Customised training to meet the delivery needs, clear documented educational planning. So as Sandy said, planning and design is the most critical phase here, but don't forget the support structures. So once you implement, the critical then is the support that surrounds it, both for the teachers, but also the students. And then the last slide was just some tips there, you know, that just putting it into an online content is and putting it in a digital format is not the answer. You still got to think about how you're going to interact, or the student's going to interact with each other, with their teacher, and with the content. You know, so those three interactions are critical. Students learn best by doing. So the more you can get them doing something, even whether that's, you know, in their own time, in a virtual classroom, or in the face-to-face, the more doing they can do, the more retention of knowledge, the more application of skill. And then, you know, that, as pointed out earlier there, online learning just precedes the application of knowledge in a real or simulated work environment. That's still a component of it. So whilst people have this misconception that everything's going to be done through that technology platform, it's not. There's always got to be some doing in a workplace that occurs.
Thank you, Julie. You want to say something, Sandy?
I just wanted to offer to answer any other questions at any other time. So you've got our contact details.
Yeah, we will put up the we will put up the presentation in the ILO website. Yeah.
More than happy to chat anytime.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
And I can provide, you know, for each of the slides, the notes, the things that we said, if that helps, especially if it wants to be translated, I can provide the full PDF with the notes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. Baik, Bapak Ibu, saya akan tutup dengan memberitahukan linknya. Tadi sudah banyak yang tanya ya. Baik, silakan Bapak Ibu nanti bisa akses materinya ke websitenya ILO. Ini link singkatnya. Link singkatnya. Ya, tapi sebenarnya ini ada, kalau mau ini bisa juga ke, sama kok, ini bisa ke, ya itu di websitenya ILO. Kemudian untuk sesi berikutnya, sorry, tanggal 2 Juli tuh kayaknya Jumat, saya salah kayaknya. Sebentar. Oh, nggak ada yang bener ya, Kamis ya. Kamis tanggal 2 Juli. Jamnya
Ya,
sama.
maaf, presentasinya nggak masuk.
Dan topiknya adalah standar dari diklat vokasi daring. Nanti seperti biasa kami akan sebarkan flyernya, kemudian juga cara pendaftarannya. Silakan ditunggu informasinya dari kami. Baik, demikian Bapak Ibu. Terima kasih banyak. Selamat siang. Mohon maaf kalau ada salah-salah. Semoga bermanfaat. Sampai jumpa di sesi ketiga. Ya. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.